decided to go color coordinated on this one because what the hell. Try new things, they tell me. Every time I try something new it gets fucked up, but that's beside the point. But anyway, a topic for today's episode, boys and girls, is my VHS dynasty. Now, I know a lot of you guys go back to the video store stuff. A lot of you guys never experienced the old grindhouse thing or the drive-in thing or anything like that. Your grindhouse and your drive-in was your local video store. Now, I guess it was about mid-'80s when home video started hitting. I remember my first VCR was $800. It was this Magnavox thing with a wired remote that had like piano keys that you depressed. And then there was, let me see, the thing weighed about 60, 70 pounds, and a blank tape was like $18 then. And of course, being that I'm a movie buff, and being that even as a kid, I envisioned that someday you would be able to watch what you wanted to watch on your own TV. Of course, you know, when you were a kid, you know, especially my age, it was like Ken films and Castle films and 8mm projectors. Well, when I got my first VCR, I drove over to Video Shack on Broadway in Manhattan and bought two of my favorite movies at that time for $59.95 each. Night of the Living Dead and Assault on Precinct 13. So, being a movie collector back then was basically cost prohibitive. So the only way to override that was to basically get another VCR if you could afford it, and then, you know, copy them. So that's what a lot of guys were doing, serious collectors, because like I said, $60 a whack is a hell of a lot of money for a VHS tape. But I had just basically quit being a mechanic and was doing flea markets for a living when I saw all this happening around me, and I said, you know something? Good move would be to try to open a video store. So I made my first mistake. I got a partner. And we both put up seed money. I think it came to like $500, which isn't a lot today, but was a little startup then. I was trying to establish connections with companies, and one of the companies I did establish connections with was Caballero, the adult company. And, you know, I inquired that this is what I was going to do. I was going to open a store, and, you know, I wanted to set something up. And basically, a feature film like 8 to 4, or I Like to Watch, or Insatiable was going to cost me $50 wholesale. The cheaper 1-hour films would cost me $30, and the Swedish eroticas would cost me $30. So, okay, now I'm getting a feel for the whole thing. But also, I'm going around looking at empty stores and trying to deal with town ordinances. And the town ordinances prohibited the adults-only stuff. So basically, that's where your money was. So, all right, I'm going from, you know, local towns. I was in Lyndhurst. Lyndhurst was definitely a no-no. Rutherford was a no-no. But in the interim, my partner decided to order some stuff from Caballero. Pretty much he blew our $500 seed money on 10 movies. I was livid. And when I figured this out, I said, you know something? I don't need this guy. And I can't find a location, so that's pretty much, you were fucked on that whole deal. So now I got $500 worth of smut that this guy has been rubbing one out to. So, all right, I already done the 2-machine deal because I was collecting movies, so I figured the only way out of this, the only way to recoup was basically to, you know, there was no copy guard on porn movies, thank God. So I would basically put 3 porn movies on a fucking tape and sell them for $25. And I did that until I got the $500 seed money back and got rid of my partner. So now I'm thinking, all right, you can't do a brick and mortar video store because it's going to be too many fucking problems. So why not take the whole thing on the road? Because I was doing flea markets, and at that time there was nobody selling used VHS tapes. But of course, I'm not going to get $50 a whack for, you know, a porn film, obviously. So what I would do was, originally when I started out, I would go to these struggling video stores that basically were going belly up, and go in and say, listen, when you get to the end, when you can't sell anymore, here's my phone number, let's make a deal. Now, what happened was, back then, of course, all the mainstream shit went like crazy, but the cult, the horror, the weird stuff didn't. So I would buy up and basically start building my own collection with, buying out these stores. So then we go a step further. I, of course, need other stuff. So we had something out back then called the Want-Ad Press. And I found somebody down in Neptune, New Jersey that had cheap movies. Now, as far as cheap movies go, the only sell-through movies back then were the good time stuff. You had Devil Bat, The Corpse Vanishes, and Night of the Living Dead, because Night of the Living Dead was all over the place. There was a bunch of other ones, but basically for $9.95, that was all you could buy. So I go down to this place, I believe it was Neptune, New Jersey, called Video Warehouse. And this guy had porn, he had regular movies. The regular movies were like $5 a piece. He had the usual public domain, but for some reason he had the Blob. He had the banned Warner Brothers cartoons, which I wish I had kept. And he had Midnight Video, The Wizard of Gore and all that other good stuff. Those tapes were about $25. Now, the porn, he had 30-minute compilations, which were $7. Hour compilations, which were $10, and features, which were $18. Well, of course, I went with the cheaper end and just added $10 on them. So now I'm taking this stuff around to flea markets and basically doing all this stuff on the down low. Well, the guy down in Video Warehouse was named Lou. So Lou would call me up when he had a quote deal. Well, sometimes the deals weren't good, but see, they would take care of guys like me because I would walk in, they'd call me Mr. Green because I'd have cash. So, all right, he's good for a certain amount of stuff. And then I found somebody else in Union on Route 22 who was a couple bucks cheaper. But you had to buy 100 of them. So at that time, it was taking off and I was moving a lot of these tapes. Where I was, basically, I was at I used to go to Englishtown, but Englishtown became a joke after a while because Englishtown was basically, I would go garbage picking and sell used stuff down there. There's a whole backstory to this whole flea market thing that I may get into later, but let's just concentrate on the video stuff. There was too much going on around where I lived, so I decided to branch out where I hadn't been before. Now, there was an indoor flea market up on Route 46 in Rockaway Township called the Rockaway Marketplace. They had indoor booths, and they would let guys set up in the parking lot. So I had started that, with other things, and met a guy named Alan, who eventually was outside selling tools, but eventually took over the indoor market. So now I'm doing all this stuff. I'm wheeling and dealing with this, VHS stuff. I'm bouncing from place to place. Then I find another ad in the Want-Ad Press. It's in Jersey City. So, all right, I call this guy up. I make an appointment to meet him, and I go to the address, and the address is a bail bonds office. And I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? So I go to a payphone, because we didn't have cell phones back then, and I call this guy, and I'm like, I'm at your address, dude. Where are you? He's in the basement. He rented out the basement of this bail bond office. So his name was Mike. I called him Whiny Mike because he always whined about everything. You could get deals. He had used stuff. He had new stuff. And, of course, he had porn. So, his price was commemorative to anything else. But the strange story was that the bail bond office up on top was run by an old-time skip tracer named Lou. And when Robert De Niro did the movie, what the hell was the one with Charles Grodin? Oh, shit, what the fuck? Why can't I remember this movie? Because Charles Grodin was an annoying bastard in the movie. But anyway, De Niro's character was a bounty hunter, and he sat down with Lou and learned the bounty hunter trade. I think it was Midnight Run was the name of the movie. I'm sorry, Midnight Run. So basically, Robert De Niro was in there, and I wasn't around then, and, he was getting all his information from Lou, who was an old-time, like I said, old-time skip tracer. And Lou hated all Mike's customers, but for some reason he liked me, which was to my benefit. So a lot of weird stuff happened at our office. That the ex-wrestler, Dr. D, David Schultz, his real name is David Scholes, showed up in there one time and was staring at me, and I scared the shit out of me, and I left. Other guys were in there. It was, it's just a strange, group of people. Upstairs were these, skip tracers, and downstairs was this, video place. So I did a lot of business with him. But again, there were a certain amount, it was maybe 100 different movies that were X-rated that were footballed around forever, changing titles, whatever. I mean, there was new releases with John Holmes, 5 years after he passed away, so that's the type of thing you were dealing with. But anyway, I established a really good customer base at the Rockaway Marketplace. What happened was, of course, with flea markets back then, local towns hated them. Because, guys like me were selling basically new merchandise that they bought wholesale in New York and was undercutting the local merchants. So in Rockaway, they decided they didn't want any more outdoor vendors. But I cut a deal with Alan, and I basically set up against the window of his store. So legally, I wasn't in the parking lot, and I could say I was part of his thing, and basically I was paying him like $100 a month to do that. Well, in the interim, my wife was working as a nurse on a dialysis unit, head nurse, and she became sick. And nobody knew what was wrong with her. Eventually, it became MS, known as MS, that she had. It was hard to diagnose. So, all right, now I'm in a position where I was always pulling my own weight as far as paying the bills and shit, but now I got to pull double my weight. So the flea market was open Thursday night, Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. I would be up there Thursday in the morning and set up. Same thing Friday, same thing Saturday. In all kinds of shit weather, in snowstorms because I had an overhang and shit because I had to make the nut. Well, around then, you're running around, you're buying this, you're buying that, and I was down at one of my warehouses when a guy came in and said that he could get these VHS tapes. And he gave me a list, and I'm looking at this shit going, all right, this is all pretty current stuff. And he wants $6 a piece for them, so I'm thinking they're hot. So I give the guy an order. Well, at that time I was dealing with another outfit called Primetime Video, who was the guy that came up with the idea to put video rentals in supermarkets. So he had a lot of great stuff, but with him, his name was Johnny Zuck, whatever, his whole thing was that the price depended on his frame of mind when you got there. What was $5 one day could be $8 the next day. Plus, he was basically buying back from his franchisees and screwing them on the buyback. And I ran into one of them who was at a flea market, and I said, you know something, if you don't want to do this, just call me up. I'll come down and buy you out, which I did. So I sort of circumvented John. But when I saw this thing, a list of tapes, I'm thinking, man, I could hit him for $10 a piece, no problem. So the guy brings them over, and it's stuff like Die Hard, and I think it was Red Scorpion at the time. They're in Amaray wraparound boxes. They're fucking bootlegs. I look at the guy and go, you can't be serious. I can't sell this shit. Well, you ordered them. I said, I ain't taking them, dude. I said, you should have told me they were bootlegs. I thought they were swag or whatever the hell you were doing. So we're going back and forth, and he tells me to go fuck myself, go get them myself from now on, and he storms out. Well, he left the address there. The address was a place called New York City Liquidators, which I would become very familiar with. But I didn't go over there right away. So now I'm trying to, smooth over this whole thing where I told this guy, John, I'm getting him all this wonderful stuff. Now I can't. Also, a little history thing. You remember when Walmart had the bins and bins of cheap DVDs? Well, that was all John, too, because what John was doing I don't know what he's doing now. He's probably gone, retired, or maybe even dead. He was going to these companies and basically offering them ridiculously low money for DVDs and flipping them to Walmart and tripling his money. So that's what started that. I don't think it's going on like that anymore, but back then that's when the DVD thing. But anyway, I decided to go down and visit this New York City Liquidators place and run into a guy named Norman Brill and tell him Tony sent me because the guy's name was Tony. I told him what I do, what I can do, this and that and the other thing, so he makes me a deal on a couple cases of cheap porn. So I established a rapport. where basically, I told him what I did, and if he bought out a store and I wanted to get over there, he would call me, and I'd be over there like 7 o'clock in the morning waiting in front of his store because he didn't open until 7:30. But being that I didn't have commercial plates on my van, I had like a half hour to shop or get towed or ticketed. So this became a routine. I was living in Wayne at the time, so you basically had, let me think, maybe a 45-minute drive to the Lincoln Tunnel if you left early. And the trick was to get over the Route 3 bridge before 6:30, because when the traffic jacked up. So, yeah, that's what I was doing for a while. Then when I moved to a PatCon, it was like a 2-hour drive. So you can imagine the time I was leaving first thing in the morning to get over there. Like I said, he became my main source, and I bounced back and forth with him, between him and Mike and a couple other people. People wanted cheap stuff. And also, at that time, I found another flea market up in Jefferson Township on Route 15 at the Fireman's Field, which was only once a month. But that once a month was a huge payday because it was like Saturday and Sunday. And they would tolerate me selling the X-rated stuff as long as I kept it undercover, and I would always slip the firemen a couple tapes at the end of the weekend for their wet downs, whatever the hell they were calling them, with the, they watched the shit in the firehouse. So I didn't care. That would eventually blossom out to become a weekly thing, like every week. So, which was good because, I'm jumping around here, but what happened with Rockaway was, I became friends with Al, and I did take an indoor booth at one point, but I was selling clothes, and it just became too much of a fucking hassle to do, so I got out. So I was on the outside. Well, we're getting around Christmas time, and I can't remember what year it was, but all of a sudden, Alan needs the rent real quick, or else he's going to have to shut the place down, and nobody wants to lose the Christmas sales. Well, what happened was, after he collected the rent, he went home and faxed over a bankruptcy notice to the landlord. So now the landlord is going to shut the place down until he goes around and collects next month's rent. He was going to give us 3 months to get out. But after he collected next month's rent, he found out that what he had been giving and what he just got were two hugely different things. So he decided to keep it open, but yours truly had to make a decision. Fold it up or go inside, because there was too much shit going on from the town. So I decided to suck it up and take a small booth for like $150 a month to see if the people would follow me inside, which they did. So then I took a bigger booth. And then there was a built-in booth in the middle of the thing which was pretty big, and then the owner abandoned it. So I cut a deal with the operators. I said, I'm not going to pay huge money for this, but if you want, I'll take it. So me taking that enabled me to pretty much establish a back room, which pretty much paid the bills. So now I could rack this thing out. I had shelves, video, it was all sectioned out. And I started making deals with the local video stores because they were paying through the nose for the adults-only stuff, and I wasn't. And what they would do is, when a new release came out, they'd buy 3 copies, and when the rentals slowed down, they would sell 2 of them off. So what I would do is I'd trade them the adult stuff for their used current stuff, which would keep me sort of current, because I had a vast array of people coming into this place. And they were film collectors, and a lot of them, knew me from Chiller Theater because I was down there, and they would, come up, and a lot of people maybe watching this thing would probably remember this whole deal. So I called it Past Midnight Video, put up a big sign, had windows, had the back room with a secret window you could pay through, and everything was cool. But like I just alluded to, the summer months were lean because everybody would be outdoors, and if they were shopping at the outdoor markets. Well, I had Jefferson, but I couldn't leave this alone. Well, I had a customer who became a friend of mine named Freddie, who had spinal bifida and was in a wheelchair. So he was always being dropped off at the market because he wanted, needed a place to hang out. So I said, you want to run this place while I'm gone? I'll give you X amount per hour and, discount on whatever you want to take and do it like that. So that worked out. So I could basically go out and do, the outside markets until it got shitty and then come back in for the winter, which was all cool. So I had a really good thing going here. And the funny part was, a lot of some of my best customers were the Pagans Motorcycle Gang and the Morris County Sheriff's Department. And they were all undercover, and I knew who they were, so it was all cool. So there was a lot of, back and forth, but then, the thing was, I was always running back and forth to Norman, and I was always getting new stuff, and sometimes business was so good that I actually would pay my rent for the month on the first Thursday of the month because I'd taken that much on the tapes and the porn. Like I said, it was all good. But, all good things, unfortunately, must come to an end. I basically had been up there, oh, God, for over 10 years, I think. And, like I said, things are good until they don't get good. And then the owners of the building wanted to give the flea market to some whiz kids who basically wanted to throw us all out, revamp the market, and bring us back in at 3 times the rent. Well, we had a meeting, and I sort of went off on the meeting saying, I'll be out of business if I'm out of here because I'm gone for 3 months. They go somewhere else. Well, there was a bunch of dickering back and forth and things like that, and I realized that, okay, my time was up. I'm going to have to get out. So a bunch of us were going to try to go in on the store, but 4 different personalities in a big store, and I know that a bunch of them did try it, not me, not anybody I was connected with, but other dealers that were, more low-key than I am. They took a store, and basically that tanked. I had come to a realization that all of a sudden, I was basically selling my tapes $10 each, 3 for $25. And all of a sudden, I wasn't getting that. So I went up to Jefferson with my store stock and cut the fucking price to $5. And it was like pulling teeth to get that. So I knew the ride was over. And unfortunately, I had to blow all this stuff out. People were saying, you're going to get another store, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Well, I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking, everything's coming to an end, like things usually do. So, and the only reason a lot of these guys wanted me to get into the store was so they had a place to hang out. Because I kept hearing, where are we going to hang out now? I actually had a sign hanging up in the store, hang out here all day and don't spend any money, $10. Because you did have your hanger-oners, but, what are you going to do? Sometimes they spent, sometimes they didn't. So, anyway, that was sort of the end of it. I was cut loose. I had nothing to do. And that's when Norman offered me the job at Liquidators. So I did live my dream. I had my own video store, did my own thing, sold the movies I liked, and the other movies basically paid the bills. And like I said, I had a great cult section, had a great horror section, had a great kung fu section. All the stuff was good. And, like I said, it kept me going for a lot of years. But sadly, like I said, the corporate greed gets into everything. That was the whole thing. Probably if the owners had messed around, it would have lasted another couple of years. But when I saw people not spending, especially on the outside, when I'm blowing stuff out on the cheap, I realized, hey, it was over. Time to get out. So the next phase of my life moved on to New York City Liquidators. So that's our story for today. And problems in the world are getting worse and worse. All I can do is hope everyone stays safe, stays cool. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing. And we'll see you on the flip side.